So Commissioner Clark, what do you see as some of the biggest issues that FERC is dealing with right now?
Sure. Reliability is always job number one, I think, for regulators. It's about keeping the lights on. And that's one of those issues that impacts both state officials and state regulators and federal officials and federal regulators. Energy policy is one of those areas where there's not a clean line between what the federal government does and state governments do. It's an area that we both interact with quite a bit. States more on the local distribution utilities, FERC through the bulk power system, but the issues of keeping the lights on, when they go out, a constituent really doesn't care whether it was the federally jurisdictional high voltage transmission line that went out or whether it's a local distribution line that went out. They just want the power back on. So reliability is a big one that the Commission is working on and working on a lot with state officials across the board. Market reforms, of course, it's very dependent on what part of the country you're in. The electricity grid and energy is highly regional, so a lot of the market reforms that are going through will be continuing part of the Commission's focus for some period of time.
Okay, and with regards to reliability specifically and some of the discussion that we've had at our meeting, there's been the concern about the closing of coal and nuclear plants and how that might affect reliability, especially during extreme events. What is FERC, I guess specifically to deal with those issues, what is FERC looking at doing? Yeah,
there's a number of things. Some of them, again, are going to be things that will reside at FERC's level, and some are going to be things that state officials are going to have to focus in on. And here again is one of those areas where it's going to affect different parts of the country in different ways. But there's reason to be concerned about the large number of plants that are going to be coming offline. That's happening for lots of different reasons. Some of them are market forces. There's been a hard turn towards natural gas in the markets themselves because natural gas is now much more abundant and affordable than it's been in the past. Some of it is related to new environmental regulations that are coming down the line, promulgated by primarily EPA, that are pushing more and more of those plants offline and moving towards, again, it seems like natural gas has become where they're moving. From a FERC perspective, our authority and responsibility is always over the bulk power system itself, so the large regional grids that cover oftentimes multiple states. And in that regard, FERC has been doing a deep dive into a number of issues. The gas-electric coordination effort that FERC has been undergoing, where we're trying to gather information and encourage utilities from an operational standpoint to understand the importance of this change as we move to a more gas-centric world away from coal and some of the nuclear units, has been one part of the effort. There's going to be a lot of things that will be done on the state level, however, that will continue to need to be done, including understanding the nature of your regional utilities. FERC doesn't have jurisdiction over generation per se. That's still a state level authority, so it's going to require a high degree of collaboration both between FERC but also among states, and understanding exactly how these closures are going to impact their grid. What we've learned from some of the things like the polar vortex and the cold weather events that we had this last winter is that the system is very tight. And it's much tighter than it's been in the past, which means we have a lot less room for error. And it's going to require a great deal of coordination moving forward, because it was a stress test. And while we pass this winter, as we bring more and more traditional units offline and transition to something else, we need to make sure that we don't end up with greater problems than we've had in the past.
Mm-hmm. And with regards to, as you mentioned, the EPA regulations and addressing this reliability issue,
yeah.
I guess they go hand in hand to some extent. With regards to more coal plant shutting, what is FERC's role, I guess, in ensuring reliability, or obviously I wouldn't think they ensure compliance, but helping states meet reliability requirements while
Sure.
trying to meet some of the mandates set by EPA with regards to emissions, greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah, typically where FERC's role is going to come in is especially as it relates to some of the larger regional grid operators, like regional transmission organizations, independent system operators, these RTOs and ISOs, who are jurisdictional to FERC. And FERC oftentimes has capacity reliability requirements in terms of the amount of generation that has to be available. There are a number of mechanisms that FERC uses, and they differ in different parts of the country in terms of how we encourage and incent that generation to be there. But beyond setting the broad parameters of trying to ensure reliability, ensure that resources that receive, say, something we call capacity payments through the markets that FERC oversees, that they're available and reliable and they show up, much of the focus on individual units in terms of resource mixes, in terms of what units actually get funded by captive ratepayers, all of those decisions are made at the state level. So there's a high degree of integration that happens between those state jurisdictional activities, which actually in some cases determine what generation can be built or can't be built in a state, and FERC's authority, which is over a much sort of broader regions of the country, ensuring that there's enough capacity available, generally speaking, that and as I said, FERC doesn't choose the generation, but sometimes we have market mechanisms that can come into place that hopefully encourage generation to site in areas where it's needed.
And how is FERC working to protect the grid or help states protect the grid against cyber and physical threats that might cause, obviously, outages or other concerns with regards to reliability?
Yeah, FERC has authority, again, over the bulk power system, so those large regional parts of the country, and has had that now for about 9 years, since the Energy Policy Act of 2005, where we have mandatory enforceable reliability standards on the electric utility industry. With regard to both cyber and physical, there are now in the process of standards being put in place so that there are federal standards that hopefully ensure what I like to describe as an ecosystem of security that make it more likely that you're going to have secure critical infrastructure and less likely that you're going to have massive blackouts. But there are still lots of things that are going on at the state level that inform that process. So take something like physical security. FERC is in the process of developing in its relationship with the North American Reliability Corporation, NERC, standards and mandatory enforceable standards as it relates to physical security around critical infrastructure, high voltage transmission facilities. As these rules are promulgated, an important and critical piece of it is probably going to be at the local level, having the utility coordinate with local law enforcement to ensure that they're aware of the types of facilities that are out there, and that local law enforcement can be a partner in helping to ensure just another set of eyes on the ground in protecting some of these assets that are going to need to be protected. Again, a general FERC standard, but there's going to be a lot of local and state processes that inform that and that help carry it out to ensure that the facilities that are identified and need to be mitigated as security risks are done in an appropriate manner.
And what is FERC doing to support, this is a more general question about state activities, and while I know FERC works on a regional, somewhat of a regional level,
Yeah.
How are they working, say, to support states and state policymakers as they are working also, obviously, to address these problems?
Sure. One of the things that we're very active with, and FERC has been for many years, is especially working with our regulatory colleagues in NARUC, the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners. There are our peer colleagues who are on the state utility commissions across the country. And so for a number of years, but especially in recent years, we've had an ongoing set of dialogues and collaboratives with our state regulators because, as I said, there's sometimes not a fine line between state jurisdiction and federal jurisdiction. It's one of those areas where we really are forced to work with each other, and appropriately so. And so we've been working with them a lot as we try to give them access to resources that FERC has in terms of things like cybersecurity, physical security, but also to learn from them things that are going on at the retail level. FERC doesn't regulate, nor does it have the authority to regulate retail rates, for example, but retail rate structures and how utilities are regulated within individual states has an enormous impact on wholesale electricity markets and on reliability, which are things that FERC does have regulatory authority over. So it's important that we continue to collaborate together. Things that happen in state legislatures obviously have a great impact on how public utility commissions do their work, how utilities themselves are regulated in the state. So it's important to have that dialogue as appropriate with our state legislative colleagues as well, because a lot of things that they do impact the work of FERC jurisdictional activities. Clearly, a lot of the things that FERC does can have an impact and a cost impact on things that are taking place in the states.
Okay, well, great. Thanks so much for your insight and sharing your time today.
You bet. Happy to be here.